welcome to my channel. I am Onyie, and this is Onyie Sings. Welcome everyone, and let's get right into it. So I watch and listen to a lot of media. I'm an avid YouTube watcher and subscribe to many folks. I watch many streaming services, I listen to streaming music and podcasts, I have several social media accounts, so all this to say I'm pretty steeped in media. And through this experience, specifically as a voice teacher or a vocal coach, I've noticed some things. And when I say some things, I mean some concerning vocal issues in many folks who speak as a large part of their platform and career. Now, we all know that YouTube loves a list, and I encourage note-taking. So here's a list of the 5 most standout and most concerning things I've noticed. Number 1, pushing. Number 2, lack of breath. Number 3, fatigue. Number 4, dehydration. And number 5, dangerous vocal production. And many of these issues go hand in hand. Even you watching right now may find yourself guilty of some of these things in your everyday speech. Even as a voice teacher, I have to catch myself on occasion. Let me know in the comments at the end of the video, of course, if you find that you fall into any of these camps. Alright, so let's break them down. Let's begin with pushing. What is pushing your voice? Well, pushing usually involves creating vocal sound through tension. More specifically, you may hear it referred to as muscling the voice. So rather than using the breath and allowing your vocal folds and resonators to do their job naturally, we engage extra muscles, or overuse the correct ones, to make up for a lack of technique. And just a heads up, vocal cords and vocal folds are the same thing. Let's talk about the 3 things that contribute to pushing. One thing that contributes to pushing is an absence of breath or lack of breath management. We use the breath to not only allow us to speak or sing for long periods without stopping, the far more important job of the breath is allowing the vocal folds or vocal cords to vibrate easily and consistently, which is what creates sound. Then, riding the air allows for more vocal control, vocal dynamics, for instance getting to choose how loud or soft you want to be, and yes, being able to speak for a longer period of time without taking a breath. Now, I personally don't find that last one to be very important as a speaker. As a singer, it is far more obvious and intrusive if you stop to breathe in the middle of a phrase. For instance, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. But for a speaker, I say, please breathe when you need to. It's fine and way safer than not. Another thing that contributes to pushing is poor placement. Now, as we continue, you'll notice there will be some repetition of points. Like I said in the beginning, many of these poor technique issues go hand in hand with one another. Poor vocal placement is yet another one that happens when we don't let our natural resonators, i.e. the skull, the vocal tract, the chest, etc., when we don't let these resonators allow us ease of vocal production or ease of use of your voice. In other words, it's like having huge speakers on stage but running your music through headphones instead. Sure, there is sound coming through, but it would sound a whole lot better and fuller if you would just use the speakers that were made for the task. Lastly, sometimes it's simply a lack of trust or knowledge about the voice. If you've ever dealt with vocal trauma or dysfunction, you may pick up bad habits to compensate for the difficulty. And if you're not aware of this, it becomes the new way you use your voice, even after you've healed and are healthy again. For instance, if you had a sinus dysfunction that didn't allow you to resonate in your mask, and we'll get into what the mask is a little later, or resonate in your sinuses, you likely began muscling to push out sound since you didn't have the access to those resonators. It can also trick you into pushing because you can't hear yourself well. Everyone outside of your head hears you clearly, but because you can't hear yourself, you may push to be heard. It's like how you speak when you have headphones on. Once you take them off, you may realize you were shouting the whole time unknowingly. Also, if you don't trust your breath because you've never learned how to engage the breath, or you've struggled with respiratory issues, you use muscles instead of the breath to try to force your voice to do what you want. All of these issues can lead to pushing or muscling your voice, and pushing can lead to premature vocal fatigue, which is a tired or weakened voice. And, at worst, can actually hurt your voice by way of dysfunction or disorder. So let's dig into more and talk a little more about lack of breath. And when I talk about breath, I use the phrase breath energy rather than breath support. Considering what we just discussed about pushing, I've noticed that when people hear support, they think tension, like the tension it takes to lift something. I never want a vocalist, and yes, I'm calling you a vocalist, to think of tension when thinking about breath. Instead, I want you to imagine you are energizing the voice with breath, rather than supporting it. So, what are some symptoms of a lack of breath energy that may show up in your speaking? Here are 5 effects of poor breath management or a lack of breath energy. Number 1, you'll vocal fry more easily. For anyone who doesn't know what vocal fry is, I have a whole video dedicated to it, and I reference it in a few other videos I've done, but a short and sweet explanation is it's the crackle or frying sound your voice makes when a limited amount of air bubbles through a loose glottal closure. Essentially, it happens when you don't use enough air to actually allow your vocal folds to come together fully and with stability. And when you hear fry, it sounds exactly like its name. So it makes sense that when you run out of air at the end of a phrase, or you don't use enough breath energy behind your voice to begin with, you are more likely to fall into fry. If you wish to be a good communicator, unfortunately, this vocal quality is often difficult to understand, as well as not very aesthetically pleasing. Number 2, vocal discomfort. When you can feel your voice, that's usually a sign something is up. Your throat may feel tight, or it actually hurts when you speak. That discomfort can come from, as we spoke about earlier, muscling your voice. The job of the breath is to create easy and consistent vibration of your vocal folds, as well as a stabilizing cushioning around your larynx and a relaxed vocal tract. All these should make using your voice effortless when utilized properly. However, when we replace the job of the breath with other muscles that are only meant to be synergists, i.e. assistants, or antagonists, that then leads to tension and discomfort. We often do this as a means to control the dynamics of our voice, like to make the voice louder, for instance, and we also will do this as a means to control the sound of our voice. Now, considering you can't really hear what your voice sounds like from inside of your head, using your ears to decide how to modify your sound is not only ineffective, but can be dangerous. If you want to hear what you actually sound like, record yourself speaking. Yes, that is how you actually sound. I know, that sometimes is hard to believe and difficult to hear. This is where having a good vocal coach, wink wink, is incredibly valuable. Number 3, voice loss. When there's not enough breath behind your voice, you may experience temporary voice loss, or what is often called coming off of the voice. Much like vocal fry, when there's not enough breath to allow the vocal folds to come together fully and vibrate evenly, there will often be a moment when you go to speak or try to say a word, but barely any sound comes out or no sound at all, even in the middle of a phrase or sentence. What I hear speakers do when that happens is first get flustered or apologize, then clear their throat or take a sip of water. Now we'll get into why the water at that point isn't really helpful later in the video. If you're tired or just speaking lazily, no offense, this will happen, and the best thing you can do at that point is use it as an alarm to engage your breath. Stopping to simply take a deep breath can do wonders for both your voice and your nerves. And while we're on voice loss, Long-term voice loss can also be a result of long-term poor breath management. Over time, the wear and tear of compensating for poor technique can create very real and very serious vocal damage. Number 4, a lack of breath energy shortens your vocal range. One of the ways you can be a very effective communicator is with a dynamic voice. In music, when we talk about dynamics, we mainly mean loud and soft, but a dynamic speaking voice also refers to pitch. I think if you're watching this video, you already know that a monotone voice can be incredibly difficult to pay attention to or even listen to. Outside of using a monotone voice for affect, like in comedy or if you're playing a character, it really is an ineffective way to communicate. However, often people who don't sing never consider that speaking is also musical. The more you are able to fluctuate the pitch of your voice, the more dynamic and engaging it is.
You know, it's interesting. I'm an incredibly private person, but there's certain things that I think are important to share, and I think I talk a lot about choiceful solitude, about the fact that I'm 46 and single and all that, but you want to unpack that for the reality of, so then what do you do? How do you feel your life?
For instance, I'm going to use a snippet from the Rainbow Passage, which is often used for vocal therapy. Here's a monotone reading of it. When the sunlight strikes raindrops in the air, they act as a prism and form a rainbow. The rainbow is a division of white light into many beautiful colors. Now, contrast that with, when the sunlight strikes raindrops in the air, they act as a prism and form a rainbow. The rainbow is a division of white light into many beautiful colors. While the first monotone way may have sounded fine, a whole 30 minutes of that or an hour would be treacherous. It can almost lull you to sleep. Not to mention, even in the example, I fell into vocal fry at the end of each sentence. Like I said in the beginning, a lot of these vocal issues go hand in hand with one another. The dynamic way of speaking is a lot more engaging and also helps the listener understand what you want to prioritize them understanding. If you're lacking breath energy, you simply don't have the fuel to move through your voice dynamically. It takes breath energy to make the vocal folds vibrate, and higher pitches require faster vibrations, which requires more breath. So in order to vary in pitch when you speak, you need lots of breath energy. That way you can almost paint a picture with your vocal expression. Here's a pro tip. Warm up before you have to speak. Much like you would warm up your ankles before you go on a walk or a run, your vocal muscles need to warm up for safe use. It increases blood flow to where you need it, allowing the muscles to be more malleable and move properly. When I teach speakers, we still do the same warm-ups I do with my singers. The voice is the voice is the voice. If you're planning on using it, and you need to be heard clearly, and you want to have more control and ease of use, you must warm up. Not only does it allow you to safely use your voice, but it tells your body how much range you have access to, and encourages your body to utilize all of that range while you speak. And number 5, a lack of breath energy leaves your fight or flight response unchecked. As a personal trainer, once I really understood the effect of the breath on the nervous system, it changed my life. A deep, relaxed breath tells your body everything is okay. If your heart rate is high or sporadic, a deep breath can slow it down and even it out. If you're getting the shakes, a deep, slow breath can begin to still your body. Even if your nervousness or anxiety is shortening your breath, that usually means your breath is very shallow as your body is trying to get oxygen to your brain really quickly. So using myself as an example, before I go into an audition, I focus on slow, deep breaths while I'm waiting. It tricks my body into lowering the temperature. The deeper breath allows plenty of oxygen to get in and slows my heart rate, which often also curbs my shaky hands. It also keeps me from focusing on the fact that I am nervous, which in and of itself can become a vicious cycle. When you try to tell yourself to stop being nervous, it just exacerbates the issue. But when you recognize what it is and focus on the physiological ways or the unemotional ways you can address it in real time, I find that helps a ton. I'm sure you're starting to see that singer breath is the same as speaker breath. Though using the voice to sing may seem more athletic than speaking, that truly depends on the vocal demand of the task. You might assume jogging is more athletic than walking, but if you jog from your car to the front door of your house, that likely doesn't cost as much energy as power walking for 2 miles, right? So even if you're not a singer, your voice requires thoughtfulness and care for its health. So our next standout is vocal fatigue. Vocal fatigue, very simply, is a tired voice. Common signs of vocal fatigue include a raspier or breathier tone, also needing to use a greater effort to speak, and or voice loss, among other symptoms. And again, like I said before, a lot of these issues go hand in hand, so that's why you'll notice a lot of repeats. Some common causes of fatigue are a lack of overall rest, voice overuse, and poor vocal technique. And while fatigue, to a certain extent, is natural, our muscles do tire naturally after extended use, long-term or consistent fatigue is often a sign of a bigger problem. For speakers, since vocal health is less of a priority among the necessary skill sets, fatigue is not often considered important, if considered at all. If you are a singer, you are hyper-focused on your vocal health, and we learn to know our voices to get ahead of any problems and immediately rectify them before they show up in performance. Let me say again, this is why it's worthwhile, if not a necessary investment, for you to get a vocal coach if you're a speaker. Now, a couple other causes of fatigue can be illness and dehydration. And speaking of dehydration, let's get into our next standout. Now, we know that dehydration is a lack of water, right? Well, did you know it takes about 3 to 4 hours to hydrate your vocal folds after you drink it? Yes, so when you take that quick sip right before you mic up or press record, you're already in trouble. If you didn't start drinking water essentially when you got up to start the day, you're likely already at a deficit by the time you need it to speak. And a quick sip will not ensure that your voice is ready for extended use. Not yet, at least. One sign of dehydration that is a huge impediment for speakers is smacking on the mic. Yeesh, it drives me nutty when I hear it, not just because of the aesthetic, but because I hear that poor body longing for water. When your body is dehydrated, it overproduces secretions to make up for the lack of moisture. Those secretions are extra saliva and thicker mucus. There you have the smacking sound that happens as you articulate. You may notice that even the action of opening your mouth produces a wet sound. That extra saliva can cause that. And the thick mucus is what you may recognize as phlegm. If you find you clear your throat a ton, especially when speaking, you more than likely need to drink more water. That's also how you get the mucus to thin out. This is why you should just stay hydrated throughout the day, especially if you know you'll be using your voice for an extended period of time. Staying hydrated also combats fatigue. And I know many leaders and speakers who drink a lot of coffee or caffeinated beverages before they speak and throughout the day. Caffeine is a diuretic, and while in moderation it doesn't cause full-on dehydration, it does add to the problem if you're already lacking hydration. And the operative word is moderation. I know many of you may not be totally sure if your consistently filled thermos of black tea at your desk or your many venti lattes throughout the day would be considered moderate. But I'll leave you to use good judgment on that one and listen to what your body is telling you. And now, our last standout is dangerous vocal production. This often includes many of the points we've talked about, plus poor vocal placement. So, what is vocal placement? One of the most concise explanations I've found was in the vocal placement blog from cavanousvoice.com, and it reads, "The bones and flesh of your face, neck, and body create a space against and within which your voice resonates. Vocal placement refers to working with this vocal resonance. literally focusing your sound into a specific area where you feel or sense the resonant sensations and vibrations. The sound your vocal folds produce resonates or vibrates in different parts of your body that provide the sound we hear. One of the healthiest places you can put your sound is in the mask of your face. The mask of the face deals with vocal placement. What we consider to be the mask is literally the front of your face. It's very similar to thinking in the idea of actually having a mask on. Where would that mask lay on your face? Right in the front. Cheekbones. Think of singing into your cheekbones, but the mask of your face is right here. If you're a singer, you've likely heard the term place the sound in your mask before. But for most speakers, the concept of placement and the mask are entirely foreign terms vocally speaking. When I spoke earlier about your head being speakers, this is what I was referring to. So, when you allow your sound to be carried by the place in your face made to carry your sound, you work a lot less hard to produce full, resonant sound. When you place the sound in the back of your throat, what many folks call swallowing your sound, it is difficult to project sound and takes a ton of hard work to produce what little you get. You'll hear yourself fine, but those outside of your head will not. The best way to project is to use the science already available to you. Your skull was made to produce your natural voice, so when you use good technique like great breath energy and proper placement, you'll find the voice a lot easier to produce and a lot louder more easily. That's the effect of healthy placement. 4 examples of dangerous vocal production include: Number 1, muscling the voice for volume. This is basically pushing your voice to be louder. This happens when you don't use enough breath energy, don't use good placement, and try to just use your throat and your will to create volume. Number 2, muscling to be exciting. This is basically a subset of the volume issue, only this is often even worse because what we consider exciting may use even more muscles to push the sound out, including overusing the jaw and tongue. A relaxed and mobile jaw is indeed necessary for healthy vocal production, so there should be some movement in the jaw, but only within the range of motion that is natural to your skull. Number 3, yelling without technique. Now you see that I didn't just say yelling, but yelling without technique. This could also be seen as a subset of muscling for volume, truly. But again, this is often even more dangerous than the previous 2 points because of the amount of exertion it takes. It's the difference between smashing your hand in the cupboard door and smashing your hand in the car door. They're both painful, both can potentially do damage, but one does exponentially greater damage, hands down. Yelling without technique can take what would be damage over time with those other 2 points straight to immediate rupture if you're especially unlucky. You'll almost certainly produce vocal fold swelling, which leads to hoarseness and voice loss. So if you find that you struggle to speak after watching a football game, for instance, you're likely using this poor technique. How do you yell safely, you ask? Breath energy, healthy placement, and a good voice teacher helping you put it all together. I've even taught the lead singer of a screamo metal band. It is absolutely doable. Number 4, mumbling. Yes, a pendulum swing to the other side of the vocal production spectrum. Beyond the unattractive aesthetic of mumbling and the difficulty it causes for communication, it can also be harmful to your voice. As I spoke of earlier, healthy production requires some jaw movement. Often, mumbling doesn't utilize any jaw movement or very little at all. You're probably wondering, how much movement constitutes natural jaw movement for me? Great question! What I often have my students do to find that is what I call dumb jaw. Just let your mouth hang open like your mom always told you not to do. Where it hangs when you just open your mouth is about as far as you want to be opening it. Most people, however, are closer to the mumble jaw, which is barely any movement at all. I once had a vocal therapist many moons ago teach me to fix my mumbly ways by having me watch myself speak in a mirror. If you can't see your tongue, you're not opening your mouth enough, she said. And boy, she was right. Even as a musical theater performer in my offstage life, which is 90% of my life, I was barely moving my mouth to speak. That also came with another danger. Monotone. Here's the sequence. You barely move your mouth, so you barely need breath to produce sound, and the lack of breath means no vocal control or resonance to create a dynamic vocal range. If you watch great reporters and news anchors, you'll notice they speak with their full range of mouth motions. It's what makes it easier to vary your pitch, to enunciate clearly, and to easily produce full, resonant sound. Try it! Get in front of a mirror or watch yourself on your phone and say, "I'd love to go to the park with you." The first time should be the normal way you would say it. Then do it again, checking to see if your tongue is visible as you speak. A great way to learn how to incorporate this in your public speaking or even in your everyday speech is, yep, you guessed it, work with a vocal coach or voice teacher. At first, it may feel a bit ridiculous, but working with a teacher will help you smooth out the more awkward aspects of this new technique, as well as help you become more comfortable overall. For all these reasons and more, speakers need voice lessons. It's worthwhile to invest in the health of your voice. You don't have to be a singer to give value to your voice. You use your voice to communicate your thoughts, express your feelings, tell jokes, solve problems, and many other things that contribute to who you are and how others know you. Even your tone of voice can say a lot of things your words don't. Your voice is full of meaning. It definitely deserves being treated with care. If you want to be a confident communicator as well, you should definitely consider taking voice lessons. Your voice is instrumental in communication, especially if that is a big part of your job. If you're a teacher, YouTuber, podcaster, speaker, instructor, leader, influencer, host or anchor, or media personality, then you should absolutely invest in the health and care of your voice. The healthier your voice and the better your technique, the easier you can be heard and understood. For all you know, there is a lovely voice that people would just love to listen to buried under poor technique. And it's a lot easier to speak with confidence when you know exactly what's coming out of your face. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people basically defeat themselves in their own TED Talk by simply not having confidence in their voice. You don't need to be in love with the sound of your own voice. We know those people, and it can be a bit much. But you also don't want to be seemingly repelled by the sound of your own voice. When you take lessons, it allows you the opportunity to focus on your voice in an academic way, which makes it a lot less personal. While our voices are deeply personal, when it comes to working on technique, it's a lot easier when you take the personal out of it and work on it like any other skill. As you start picking up the technique, you'll begin to fall in love with your growth, and you get used to hearing your own voice over the course of taking lessons. Oftentimes, what we think is, "I hate the sound of my own voice," is simply, "I'm not used to the sound of my own voice." I always say for me it went from, "I can't stand the sound of my voice," and I was already a singer when I'd say this. Then it became, well, I can tolerate the sound of my own voice. All the way to, my voice can do some pretty cool things that I love. Another part of learning your voice is listening to recordings of yourself. I know, but imagine how good you would get at using your voice in speaking situations if you studied it. Think of basketball players. They constantly watch tape, and they watch tape so that they can critique their play. Your coach can tell you all the things that you need to work on, but there's nothing like seeing it for yourself and recognizing how things felt and what was going on at those specific moments. As a singer, I have to listen back to my voice lessons and performances to learn what I'm doing and where I need to fix things. Even going as far as hearing what choices I made were actually effective or what was only effective in my head. I love taking the mysticism out of vocal production. Can the voice be a gift? Absolutely, for sure. But even those with the gift must utilize skill. And I truly believe all people with voices can be skilled, if they want to be. Overall health and wellness for your body includes your voice. Don't leave her out. And on a personal note, you have a voice, and it is important, and it is yours. Let it be heard. Let it be healthy. If this is your first time visiting my channel, thank you so much for swinging by, and I'd love for you to hang around for a while. And if you are a subscriber or just returning, yay! And thank you so much for coming back. If you found this video helpful, leave a like, subscribe, and let me know what you learned in the comments, or ask me any questions that come up for you. I'm still a baby YouTuber, but would love to grow, and only you all can make that a reality. And with that in mind, please let me know if you have any ideas for future videos. Anything you have questions about or would just like me to look into or talk about. There's no stupid questions, especially when it comes to content. Thanks again for staying till the end, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye!